Okay, today I'm going to show you guys how to pre-process and stack your images all manually within Siril. We're not going to be using the OSC pre-processing script like we've done in previous videos, but the manual process will pretty much follow what that script does. So two things are going to happen with this video, hopefully for you. You're going to learn how the script actually works, and you're going to learn a little bit about how you can tweak some things if you're having issues like I did with a set of data from last year. This is a relatively basic tutorial for the manual stacking. We're not doing a deep dive into all the settings and different methods that you can use, but hopefully it's a good enough starting point to give you a good understanding of how everything works. My name is Rich, and you're watching Deep Space Astro. Okay, we're using Siril 1.2.0 RC1 today. I wanted to start this video with showing you the result that I got from running the OSC pre-processing script against some data that I took last November of the Orion Nebula. So I've already stacked it. We're going to open it up and give it a quick auto stretch to see what we have going on here. This is what I'm talking about. This red glow that we have around the star next to the Orion Nebula is what we're going to focus on getting rid of today in this tutorial. Now, if we come back in, and I'm going to switch over to my home folder real quick. You can do it one of two ways. You can use the blue house button and come over and select your process folder, just like we've done in previous videos. Or you can come down to the command line and do CD for change directory, and then just type process. And if you look up top, we're sitting in the process directory now. So I can come over to my sequence now, hit search sequences, and it shows me all the sequences that were created by the OSC pre-processing script. And we're just doing this so I can show you guys the individual frames. We're going to take a look at the registered and pre-processed light frames, and we'll unlink it to get the green tamed down and come over and click on our image list button on the bottom right corner. And if we scroll up to the very first frame, you can see, the image looks good. I don't see any issues with this. And it was doing pretty well for most of the night, but towards the end of the night, if I come down here to my last frames, you can see how the sky gradient has changed. The moon was initially up when I started shooting. I don't think that was the issue. And then it went down around 1 o'clock. I shot probably until about 5 in the morning. Again, this was wintertime, so I had a longer night, but that red glow that we were just looking at in the final stack is coming from how the image had changed around this star. So if I click through these, you can see how it fluctuates. And if you watch the background too, it looks like we had some thin clouds that came in. So I believe that's probably what caused this issue that night. And actually, the correct way to fix something like this would be to go through these frames and reject the ones that we don't want to use for the stack. Just completely get rid of them. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to leave them in place and show you how, if you pre-process and stack your images manually, it gives you more control. And sometimes you don't have to throw away the data. You can change a couple settings as you're going through the process to fix your image, something that the script can't do because it's all automated. The script's awesome, right? It does a great job, probably 99% of the time for us. But it's nice to know, A, how the script works, what it's doing, and that's what I'm going to be showing you today. And B, just have a good understanding of what pre-processing is, what stacking is, what's going on behind the curtain while the script is running for you guys. So we're going to close this. And I'm going to completely close down Siril right now, again, because we're going to do this manually. And I am going to delete the masters folder, the process folder, and the final stack. These are the 3 items and the files within them that the OSC pre-processing script created for us. So we're going to start from fresh, and now we're left just with our calibration frames and our lights frames. First thing I want to talk about, when you're doing it manually, you do not need to have any specific folder structure, right? Any of my previous videos talking about pre-processing and stacking using the pre-processing script, I told you that you needed to have these folders named exactly as you see them here: biases, darks, flats, and lights. And they all need to be within a parent folder, in this case, Orion. When you're doing it manually, it doesn't matter. You can name these whatever you want. These can be in different areas of your computer, however you organize your calibration frames and your session files, your light frames. It does not matter, because as we go through this, you're going to be selecting these files that you want to pre-process and stack. To keep things simple, I'm going to keep my Orion folder as well as these folders named as you see them. And I am going to right click and create a new folder called process, which is the same thing that the script will do for us as well. But again, just to try to give you a side-by-side comparison of how the script runs and how to do everything manually. So we'll create our own empty process folder. So with that in place, we're just going to launch Siril and hit our blue house button to set our working folder. So we're going to select the process folder that we just created, click open, and then up top in the middle, we're going to verify that we are in fact sitting in our process folder. So our first step is that we need to convert and rename our images, both calibration frames and light frames. So with this set of data, I had shot this with my Canon M50. So if we open up any of these folders, you can see it's got a .cr3 extension on it. That's the Canon RAW format. The RAW files out of the Canon camera need to be converted into FITS files before we can proceed with any calibration or registration or stacking. If you're using a dedicated astronomy camera, you still need to run through the conversion process for the renaming aspect of it. So we're going to start with our calibration frames. So over in Siril, click on your conversion tab. We're going to add our bias images. You can do it one of two ways. You can click the plus button and browse over to where your biases are at. Select them all, Control A on Windows, and click Add, and it adds all of them into the list. Or the other way that you can do it, and I'm going to clear the list here by clicking this button down here, is we can drag and drop. So I can come into my biases. Again, I can select them all, and I can drag and drop the files right into the conversion tab. The next thing we need to do is to give it a sequence name. I'm keeping it simple. Again, you can call it whatever you want, but these are biases, so I'm going to call them biases. The prefix over here, the 0001, is just that. It's a prefix for the file name. So file 1, file 2, file 3. If you find a need to change that, you can, but I recommend just leaving it at the default. Like I said, we're converting to FITS, so we're going to leave the FITS option selected. Symbolic link. Symbolic link, when you have FITS files, instead of copying those files, it'll create a link to them, saving you on hard drive space. Now, in my case, shooting with the Canon, and I have RAW files, it has to convert them, so I'm going to end up with an additional set of files anyways. But it's always good practice to leave symbolic link checked. It'll save you on hard drive space. Windows users, which is what I'm running right now, in order for that symbolic link to be able to be created, you need to make sure that developer mode is turned on in Windows. So to verify that, if you just click your Windows menu and just start typing developer, you'll see developer settings come up. Click on that, and this verify developer mode is turned on. So now we're ready to convert and rename. So we're just going to hit the big blue convert button. And this doesn't take very long, 2.15 seconds, and let's jump back over into our process folder and see what it did. So this is our sequence file that relates to all of the images that it converted and renamed. So biases is the name that we gave it, and you can see it appended the 0001 and then 2 and then 3 all the way through the files. And then there's a text file down here, biases conversion, which can come in handy if you need to figure out what the original RAW file out of your camera was for biases number 12. You just find biases number 12, and you can see right here that it was this RAW file out of the camera. So it's just a reference file. So that's our biases. Now we need to continue on, and we're going to be converting our darks, flats, and lights as well. So back over to Siril, go into conversion, click this left arrow button to clear the current list. And then we're going to come over and we're going to grab our darks next. And you can do this in any order. It does not matter. We're just converting and renaming right now. Select all the files, hit add, change the name to darks, and then click convert. All right. One more time. We'll come back to process. If we scroll down, there's our dark sequence, our converted files, and the reference file. So back over to conversion. Once again, we're going to clear out the darks that we have in there. We're going to hit the plus button, and I'm going into my flats folder right now. I'm going to select all of my flats and add those. My sequence name is going to be flats, and again, click convert. Once that's done, we're going to go back to conversion again, and we're going to do the light frames. So clear it, find our lights, select them all, click add, sequence name, you guessed it, it's going to be lights. Hit convert. Okay, now we're going to start with creating our master files for our calibration images. We'll start with the biases first. So come over to your sequence tab, and in the pull down list here under sequence selection, make sure that you select biases. If you don't see your sequences, just click the search sequences button and it should scan that directory for you. Again, just make sure biases is selected, and there is no calibration that we need to do with the bias file. So we're just going to jump right over to the stacking tab. Now you can either click stacking up top here, or you can use the button that says go to stacking tab. Either way, it takes you to the same place. Most of these settings we're going to leave at their defaults. For our method though, we're going to make sure we're on average stacking with rejection. Normalization, again, because it's the biases, we're going to change that to no normalization. Windsor rise sigma clipping with the sigma low and high at 3. We're not going to do anything with weighting. And the image rejection, we have it set to all, which is stating that it's going to stack all 25 of our images in the sequence. Down here where it says save in, the first thing we're going to do is come to the front of the line and we're going to put a ... and then type the word masters and then /. What this is going to do, and let me bring up File Explorer. So we are currently in our working folder, right? If you look up top in Siril, you can see we're sitting in the process folder. What the ... is doing is saying go back up one level. So it'll go over to Orion. Once it gets to Orion, it sees masters. First, it'll look for a folder named masters. We don't have one, so it's going to create it. So I'll show you when this is done, but we'll end up with another folder in the Orion folder called masters. Now, the rest of this, the $seq name, $stacked, is going to be our file name. So the first part of it, the $seq name, is a variable. And what it's referring to is our sequence name. So if we come back to the sequence tab, here's our sequence name. It is going to take the biases underscore part of that name and make it part of the file name that it's going to create when it finishes stacking all of our biases together. It'll then append the word stacked to the end of the file name. So I'll end up with a file named biases_stacked created in our masters folder. And I'll show you that here in a second. So once you have your naming set up, and again, you can call this whatever you want. You can tell it to save wherever you want. This is just how I do it. If you want to delete this whole line and just type biases, then it will create your biases stacked in your process folder, the current working folder. So we're just going to click start stacking, and it's a pretty quick process because I've only got 25. And if we jump over, there's our new masters folder. If we open that up, there's our stacked biases file. Okay, now we're going to create our master flat file. Before we actually stack it like we did the bias, we do need to do some pre-processing first. So the first step, again, go back to your sequence tab and make sure your sequence selection is set to your flats sequence. And then we're going to come over to our calibration tab. This is pre-processing. It's just referred to as calibration in Siril. The first thing we need to do is tick the use bias box and then click the folder button over here on the right. And we're going to browse out and select in our masters folder the biases stacked file that we just created previously. Everything else is going to remain the same. This is colored data, so we want to make sure that the CFA data box is checked. And then in our output sequence, default prefix is pp_. This pre-processing step is just going to be calibrating our flat files using our master biases stack. So it's going to create additional fits images prefixed with pp_. You can set this just like always, anything that you like. I just use the default because it makes sense to me. Click start calibration. And again, this is a pretty quick process as well. If we jump back over into File Explorer and go into our working folder, which is process, and scroll down, you will see our calibrated fit files and a new sequence that was created. So the first step of creating our stack is complete. Again, back over to sequence. Since there was a new sequence created, Siril will automatically put that new sequence in our selection box here, but you always want to verify that that did in fact happen. So pp_flats is what we're looking for. Now we can go over to the stacking tab. And in the stacking tab, you want to make sure, again, average stacking with rejection is selected. We're going to change the normalization to multiplicative. Windsor rise sigma clipping, 3 for low and high. No weighting, and we're going to stack all 25 of the images. Again, we're going to do the same thing with the stack name that we did for the biases, and we're going to put a ... /masters / and hit start stacking. And then again, if you want, you can go over into your masters folder and just verify that your new stacked flats file has been created. Now we're going to move on to creating our master dark file. So once again, go back to your sequence tab. Under sequence selection, Select your dark sequence, and there is no calibration needed for your darks, so we're just going to go right to the stacking tab, average stacking with rejection, and just like the biases, there's no normalization that we need to be doing on the darks, so we're going to set it to no normalization. Winsorized sigma clipping, default values on the low and high again are good, not doing anything with weighting, and we want to stack all 20 of the darks that I have. Once more in the save in field, we're going to put our ../masters / and click start stacking. And again, verify by going back to our masters folder, and we see our darks stacked file created for us. Okay, now we're ready to start working on our light frames. Before we get to the stacking piece, which is the last step in this process, we need to first calibrate them and then register them. So just like our previous stacks, we're going to go over to our sequence tab. We're going to select our light sequence, and then we're going to move over to our calibration tab. In the calibration tab, we're going to unselect the use of the bias stack that we had set previously, and we're going to put a tick mark next to use dark and browse out to our masters folder and select our dark stack. Same thing with the flats. We're going to select use flat, and we're going to browse out to our masters directory and select our PP flat stacked. Once again, we're working with color data, so equalize CFA needs to be selected. And we're going to leave everything else at their defaults. We're going to leave enable cosmetic correction selected. CFA data, we're using the master dark file that we selected up here. Our cold sigmas, we're going to leave at 3. Our output sequence name, similar to how we did the flats, we're going to leave it at pp_. This is just going to be part of the name of the files that it creates as it calibrates it using our dark and our flat masters. And we're going to tick debayer before saving again because this is color data. Click the start calibration button. Okay, that process is finished, and then once again, just to show you where it created those files at, we are sitting in our process working folder. So if we come back up into that process folder and scroll down to where we see the file name starting with PP, there's our flats that we did previously, and here's our PP lights sequence with all the lights files that it has created and calibrated for us. So with that step complete, we can move over to our registration tab. On our registration tab, we want to make sure we have global star alignment, deep sky selected. Our registration channel is going to be green. When you're shooting in color, the Bayer matrix is almost always RGB. Therefore, the green channel tends to have more data than the red and the blue. So we're going to leave the registration channel set to green. Transformation, minimum star pairs, all these settings we're going to leave at their defaults. We're going to register all the images from the sequence that we have selected. Just so you're aware, the stuff below the Go Register is for manual registration. It's better suited for when you're working with comets and such. So we're not going to bother with anything below the button and just click Go Register. And you can see on the screen, it's detecting the stars during its registration, and it'll create a new sequence along with these new files for us too. So registration is complete, and again, if we jump over to our process folder and scroll down, you will see a new set of pp_lights that are prefixed with R_ for registered. Okay, one last step before we get into the stacking process, and technically this can be optional if you prefer not to, but now that we've registered all of our images, we have an opportunity to go through and analyze those images before we start stacking them. So the first thing I'm going to do, you can see up here we've got our reference frame opened up from the registration that we just ran against our light frames. I'm going to take it out of linear and go into auto stretch so we can get a better representation of what's going on. With the green cast, again, RGB with that Bayer matrix. If you click your link button down here and unlink it, it'll take that ugly green away for you. So now what we're going to do is come over to our plot tab. And our plot tab is currently showing us two things. On the left hand side, it is showing us the full width half maximum of the stars in the image. And on the bottom, it's showing us our frame numbers. So we have 124 frames, 1 through 124. The analysis of our stars is showing our FWHM at the lowest point being 2.67 and at its highest point being 2.91. So those are relatively close, right? So I'm not worried about, sometimes you could look at this plot and have, let's say, for example, 2.6 on the FHWM on most of your stars, and then it jumps up considerably, 3, 4, somewhere around there. Things start looking strange and different, and you don't want to include them in your stack. So this plot allows you to show what the average is of your stars that is detected during the registration process. You can also change these. So the bottom where it says frames, That's referred to as X down here. So I can change my frame and tell it that I want to show the number of stars. And it changes it from a plotted graph to kind of like a dot matrix in a sense, I guess you would call it. So you can go through these. There was one for the roundness of the stars. We're going to leave it at frame for this one. And then the same thing on the left-hand side. This is your Y setting. You can change it to similar things. However you want to build your graph, whatever you're looking for, whatever you're trying to determine. The sliders on the top and the bottom will allow you to kind of stretch and resize the view of what you're looking at. But again, we're going to leave this at the default settings with the frames in the bottom and full width half maximum on the left-hand side. So the way you can work this, there's a couple different things you can do. First of all, well, let's point this out. Where it says legend, if you hover your mouse over there, there's your legend on what everything means in the plot itself. So the purple curve is the actual plot. The green curve are the sorted values by order of decreasing quality. And then the blue circle is indicating that's our reference frame. And the X is indicating the image that we're viewing right now is what is selected. So if you want to view any of the frames that are in the plot, put your mouse over any one of the peaks, right click, and then show frame. It'll open up our frame list for us, but it also loaded the frame that we selected. And you can see that in the graph again, that X that we had down here is now up top. The circle remained because again, that's our reference image. You can also, and I'm going to close this out, if I wanted to remove that frame, I can right click and say exclude the frame. So that frame now would be excluded from our stack. The other way is using the frame list, and you can either do it the way I showed you, right click, and when you say show frame, it'll open it up. Or you can come down to your frame list button in the bottom right corner. So our excluded frame, which is frame 115, if I wanted to add that back in, I can just select the box over on the right hand side to add that back into the list. So this is, again, I showed this at the beginning of the video, but this is also a nice way to just do a visual check of your images as you're going through, except this time we're looking at the registered files. So we can go through and just take a look at them. And if there's anything in here that we didn't want, we can either uncheck them under the selection column. I can also group select. So let's rename this one. We'll select number 11. I'm going to hold my shift key down and just click on number 3. So everything that's in this group, if I hit the checkbox up here, this excludes and includes. So if I tick it, everything was unselected. If I was to hit it again, it comes back in. You can also hold your control key down to do multiple selections. So we got number 4 there. Hold my control key down. I'll take 7, 10, 9. Then the same thing. I can exclude them or include them. Again, I'm going to leave everything in because when we get to the stacking process, I want to show you what I changed to eliminate the issue that I had with that red glow that ends up in the final stack of the image. You can also group select the stars right from the plot. So left mouse button click, draw a box around them, and I could say exclude all those points, and it just took out all those stars that I had in there. If I wanted to get them back, I have to go back into the frame list, see the ones that were unselected. The easiest way in something like this would just be to come right here and say include all the images, and it says include all, and it puts everything back in place for me. Okay, now that we've analyzed our images and decided whether we wanted to exclude any of the frames from the registered sequence, we're ready to start stacking. Again, just like always, go back to your sequence, make sure the correct sequence is selected. We are stacking our lights now as the final step in this process, so we want to make sure our registered PP light sequence is selected. Over to the stacking tab, and this is where I started to play with the settings for my final stack to see if I could fix that red hue that I had going around the star next to the Orion Nebula. So if you're trying to sort out a similar problem, or even a different type of issue that you just can't resolve using the automated scripts, then I would recommend doing the same thing that I did and just play with the different stacking methods and rejection methods. If you hover your mouse over any of these things, they give you a little summary of what each one is for. Also, Siril's documentation is a lot better recently with this new version that they've released. So reference the documentation as well. In my case, the stacking method works, the average stacking with rejection, which is what we've been doing through this whole process. Normalization, we do want to change that to additive with scaling, and that's the recommended setting when you're stacking your lights. What I ended up changing was my pixel rejection. Instead of using the Winsorized Sigma clipping, I found that the linear fit clipping is what solved my issue for me. And the default linear low and high values of 5 were fine. I didn't have to mess with those either. Weighting, we left at none, and I want to stack all 124 of my images. Now, in the previous section, when we were analyzing our images, if you did exclude any of those images, that will be reflected here. That's why it shows selected, because we were in there playing around. So it says selected 124 of 124. It's the same thing in my case. as having all selected. But if you removed, say, 10, then you would see selected, and you would see 114 images of 124 of the sequence. So again, for my case, either way is fine. I'll put it back to all. I am also going to select output normalization and RGB equalization. So the RGB equalization is a really nice function. In previous versions of Siril, even their script did not stack with the RGB equalization. And then what happens is, just like when we opened up our registered file during that process, if I link the stretch back again, you get that green tint across your entire image. And it can always be removed post after you stack and everything. But if you select the RGB equalization, you'll see once the final stack is done and we open that file back up, we won't have that issue with the green cast across the image. Again, with the save in file, I'm going to do the same thing we did with the other stacks and put it in the masters directory just so it's easier to find. So .. masters / and instead of using the variable for the sequence name and the word stacked, similar to what the script is doing, I'm just going to call it result and then click start stacking. Okay, our stack is complete. Now all we need to do is come up to our open button. I'm going to browse to my masters folder and open up my result.fit file that was just created. We're in linear. We're going to change that to auto stretch. And the first thing you'll notice is that green tint is not there like I was mentioning before, whether we're linked as we are currently or unlinked. And more importantly, that reddish hue that I had around that star has now been resolved, all because of a simple setting change during the final stacking process. So that's manual pre-processing / calibration and stacking within Siril. Hopefully I was able to teach you something. Tried to keep it as basic as I could without getting too crazy about all the different settings that we have available to us. I'd like to also say that this video has been sponsored by Brilliant.org, which is a fantastic place to go online to learn all things math, science, computer science. They have thousands of lessons that you can take, all in an easy format to understand and learn. It's not like sitting in a traditional classroom where you're expected to read books and then take tests afterwards. They present it in a nice, simple format that makes the learning fun and easy. I recently started using their site just to exercise my brain. And just like the muscles in our body, our brain needs to exercise as well. It needs something to do. You need to keep it active to keep it sharp. And Brilliant does just that for you. No matter what your interests are, Brilliant has a course for you. And they're adding new courses every month. This is one of the things you can do during those cloudy nights. To try everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/deepspaceastro or click on the link in the description below. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. I also want to say thank you to all my members of the channel. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you to all of you for watching my videos and leaving the great comments that I've been reading. I appreciate everybody's time. I'll see you in the next video, and clear skies.